Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. The United States has unilaterally declared re-imposition of UN sanctions on Iran. In a statement, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington will hold accountable all UN members who don't implement the curbs. Iran has asked the world body to block the U.S. sanctions, calling it Washington's actions null and void. In a letter to the UN Security Council, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he cannot take any action on the U.S. decision because of uncertainty. The Taliban say only an Islamic system can solve problems and heal the wounds of Afghanistan's people. In a statement, Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said it is now time to insist upon greater religious objectives. Mujahid said in the Islamic system, women can work in the areas including education, health, policing, but in a safer environment. Tens of thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in Bangkok for the second straight day against Thailand's King Maha Vajiralongkorn. Protesters are demanding a major reduction in the king's powers, removal of the Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, a new constitution and elections. They also installed a plaque near the Grand Palace declaring Thailand belongs to the people and not to the monarch. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. The United States has declared re-imposition of United Nations sanctions on Iran. This comes after the Trump administration failed to extend the conventional weapons embargo set to expire next month under the Iran nuclear deal.
In a statement, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington will hold accountable all UN members who don't implement the curbs. He said sanctions include the ban on engaging in enrichment and reprocessing related activities and ballistic missile development and testing. The transfer of nuclear and missile-related technologies to Iran is also among the new curbs. Speaking on state television, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said there was no mechanism for the U.S. to reinforce its controversial snapback. He warned that other countries would be subjected to the same treatment if they did not resist America's move. In a tweet, Iran's UN envoy asked the world body to block the U.S. sanctions, calling Washington's actions null and void. In a letter to the UN Security Council, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he cannot take any action on U.S. decision because of uncertainty. 13 of the 15 Security Council members say Washington's move is void. They said Pompeo used a mechanism agreed under a 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers, which the U.S. quit in 2018. Earlier, UK, France and Germany told the Security Council that they won't implement the sanctions announced by the U.S.
Well, now, viewers, for more on this, we have with us political analyst Mustafa Khushchesham from Tehran. Thank you for your time. Mr. Mustafa, why do you think Washington is pressing for sanctions on Iran if it is in compliance with the JCPOA?
Well, the United States knows pretty well that its claimed trigger mechanism is not working and it's been isolated. But they intend to, first of all, escalate tensions with Iran. You know that despite the very fact that the UN Security Council chairman has ruled out any kind of action to reimpose UN Security Council sanctions against Iran, the U.S. has declared that it would go for unilateral sanctions against Iran. First of all, to block any kind of arms trade with Iran as promised under the JCPOA. And secondly, to reimpose inspection of ship vessels and air cargoes to and from Iran. This would definitely be responded with Iran's tough response. And as stated by the top commander of IRGC of Iran yesterday, Tehran would not tolerate any kind of hostile action like that.
And Mustafa, do you think Tehran is satisfied with the position taken by the United Nations over the issue, or does it fall short?
Well, first of all, Tehran should be satisfied with unanimous backup it's receiving from the UN Security Council members, as well as the UN Security Council. But it's not enough, of course, because the U.S. is standing up to the whole world. It's humiliating the whole world and also making a mockery of the UN Security Council mechanism. It's violating the Resolution 2231 that is supporting the JCPOA. It's standing against the wishes of other member states, and therefore it's violating the rules and regulations. On the basis of the JCPOA, and as the other parties have also stressed, the sanctions on arms trade with Iran should be removed in less than a month from now.
Right. And Mr. Mustafa, lastly, do you believe the EU3 and other countries will stand by their pledge of not implementing the U.S. proposed sanctions, or will they cave into the U.S. threats?
Well, as a matter of fact, the EU3 have always proved that when it comes to political positions and words and verbal therapy, actually, they stand behind the nuclear deal in order to encourage Iran to stay under the nuclear deal, since it provides them with the best possible regime of inspections to make sure what's going on in Iran. But they are receiving merits without reciprocating it, without giving Tehran any merits. They promise to make up for the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA, and they promised again and again that they would comply with their undertakings under the JCPOA when the U.S. discarded the deal 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, but they have not taken any action, zilch, nothing at all. And in this time, we do not believe that the Europeans would go for any kind of arms deal with Iran, but these are the Chinese and the Russians that should show their support in action and go for a deal in reality on the ground after October the 18th, 7 days from now.
Right. Mustafa Khosheshan, political analyst from Tehran, thank you very much for your time. Now, moving on, the Taliban say only an Islamic system can solve the problems and heal the wounds of Afghanistan's people. In a statement, Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said it is now time to insist upon greater religious objectives. Mujahid said in the Islamic system, women can work in the areas including education, health, policing, but in a safer environment. He said from the time intra-Afghan negotiations began and the Taliban echoed the call of an Islamic system as a focal point of discussions. Earlier, President Ashraf Ghani asked the Taliban to declare a humanitarian ceasefire amid peace talks in Doha. In a statement issued by the presidential palace, the Afghan president said a lasting ceasefire is essential to ensure the security of Afghan civilians. He also condemned yesterday's fatal attack on deputy head of HEKMATYAR Provincial Council in the Gardir city. Meanwhile, veteran Afghan fighter and head of the Hizb-e-Islami party, Bulletin HEKMATYAR, has expressed willingness to form an alliance with the Taliban. Speaking in Kabul, HEKMATYAR said his party is ready for direct talks with the Taliban for partnership and cooperation. He said if the two groups join hands, the crisis in Afghanistan will end soon and no force will be able to stand against it. HEKMATYAR added his party will be looking forward to the talks once the first rounds of negotiations between Kabul and the Taliban are completed. He said the Afghan government is weak while the Taliban and Hizb-e-Islami share mutual values. HEKMATYAR also said India is dissatisfied with the peace push and has started backing militias to act as spoilers. Now, 5 civilians have been wounded after missiles hit Saudi Arabia's Jizan region. Saudi state media says 3 cars were also damaged in the attack on a border village in Al-Harth Governorate. The media quoted Jizan Civil Defense spokesperson Colonel Muhammad Yahya Al-Ghamdi as saying missiles targeted civilians protected under international humanitarian law. Ghamdi accused Houthis of the attack, but they have yet not claimed responsibility. Meanwhile, the Pakistan Army says its 2 soldiers have been martyred during an exchange of fire with terrorists in a town of Miranshah in North Waziristan. In a statement, the military's media wing said security forces were conducting an intelligence-based operation in the area of Spalga. It said the security forces have cordoned off the area for a clearance operation. Earlier, the army killed 4 terrorists in an operation in the Avara district of southwestern Balochistan. The ISPR said security forces also recovered a large cache of arms, ammunition and other equipment. This comes a week after the army killed a terrorist commander, Ihsanullah, near the inter-district boundary of North and South Waziristan. Now, the number of COVID-19 deaths continues to steeply decline in Pakistan as 1 person lost his life to the virus in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 640 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. It said the number of active cases in the country stands at 6,952. The ministry said so far over 292,000 people have recovered from the disease. It said 837 people are admitted in the hospitals, out of which 106 are on ventilators. Now, in India, more than 1,100 people have died and over 92,000 have contracted COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has crossed 86,000 with more than 5.4 million confirmed cases so far. The novel coronavirus has claimed over 957,000 lives across the globe and has infected more than 30.7 million so far. More details in this report.
The world has pinned hopes on an early release of a COVID-19 vaccine as cases start surging in virtually all parts of the world. After the Americas and India, the disease is now again spreading across Europe with no exception. France set another record in daily infections since the disease started to spread in the country. The UK has also recorded its biggest increase in COVID-19 cases since May. Restaurants and shopping centers reopened in Bolivia after 6 months of lockdown to stop the spread of coronavirus.
The pandemic situation has been very irregular, and you have another group of people that don't even use a face mask. We have entered a phase of false security in the population, and that could see a second wave, or we could at least be seeing an uptick in the pandemic.
Meanwhile, doctors in Turkey are protesting against inadequate measures, accusing the government of misreporting the caseload to downplay the virus.
As we said, these numbers do not reflect the reality. We know the real number of patients is at least 10 times higher than the number revealed by the Health Ministry, and the number of deaths are at least 3 times higher. And these are just the assessments based on patients with positive PCR tests.
COVID-19 continues spreading aggressively through Indonesia, piling a record daily increase in confirmed cases. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, number of daily deaths and infections are on the rise as the country reports the highest caseload in Southeast Asia.
Moving on, Turkey says it has killed 8 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry said the militants were attempting to infiltrate the area of Turkey's anti-terror Peace Spring operation. It said Ankara will not allow terrorists to disturb peace and security in the Operation Peace Spring zone in northeastern Syria. Since 2016, Turkey has launched a trio of operations across its border into northern Syria. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. Meanwhile, the Interior Ministry said security forces also neutralized 2 terrorists in southeastern Turkey as part of Operation Yildirim 2 Silo. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. back now. U.S. President Donald Trump has approved the deal between Oracle Corporation and China's video sharing app TikTok. Talking to reporters, Trump said Oracle and Walmart will have total control over the company's operations in the United States. The Commerce Department said for the deal to be completed, it will delay earlier download ban ordered by a week. Trump said TikTok Global will likely have its headquarters in Texas, creating at least 25,000 direct jobs.
So everybody will be happy. It's a severance. It'll continue to be named TikTok as it was all along, and that's it. That's it. So I can say that I have given the deal my blessing. If they get it done, that's great. If they don't, that's okay too. But it's a great deal for America, and very interesting.
Well, Walmart says it will take a 7.5% stake in TikTok Global, while Oracle will have 12.5%. Now, moving on to Venezuela, which has rejected a United Nations report on alleged human rights violations in the country, calling it war propaganda. In a press briefing, Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jose Arriaza said the 444-page report is an absolute fraud. Arriaza said it was irresponsible of the United Nations representatives to not consult the authorities during their investigation. The report alleges Venezuela's socialist government committed systematic human rights violations. The investigators based the claims on over 270 interviews with victims, witnesses, former officials, and confidential documents. Arriaza said the release of the report amid U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's regional visit was meant to tarnish Venezuela's reputation.
The report is absolutely a fraud. It is a monument to war propaganda. That is exactly what this report is seeking, a moral death, the death of a reputation, and they are not going to do it. Look at how it all fits. They do this in the middle of Mike Pompeo's tour of neighboring countries of Venezuela, a tour of intimidation.
Well, Pompeo is currently on a four-nation South America tour to pressure Maduro into resigning amid economic sanctions and U.S. narco-terrorism charges. Now, moving on, tens of thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in Bangkok for the second straight day against Thailand's king, Maha Vajiralongkorn. Protesters are demanding a major reduction in the king's powers, removal of the Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha, a new constitution and elections. Criticizing the monarchy is illegal under Thailand's laws, but demonstrations have grown exponentially since they started 2 months ago. Protesters also installed a plaque in the field opposite the Grand Palace. The message on the sign reads, "Thailand belongs to the people and not to the monarch." The government has deployed unarmed police with crowds control barriers. A government spokesman has assured the police will not use violence against the protesters, but he said it is up to the police to determine and prosecute any illegal speech. Now, in Russia, supporters of Khabarovsk region's detained governor have continued to put pressure on the Kremlin, demanding a fair trial. This comes a day after Moscow court rejected a custody appeal by former governor Sergei Furgal. Furgal was arrested on the 9th of July in connection with the murder charges, which he denies. His arrest has triggered weeks of street protests in the region. His supporters say the detention is politically motivated. President Vladimir Putin has named a new acting governor, but protesters say he has no connection with the region and have called on him to step down. Moving on, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says people who break new self-isolation rules after contacting COVID-19 will face a fine up to $13,000. The new law will be effective from September 28th in England, and government officials are in talks to expand it to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. It says staying at home for at least 10 days after noticing COVID-19 symptoms will be necessary. But despite threats of these heavy fines, more than 1,000 people gathered in central London to protest government-imposed COVID restrictions. Earlier, Johnson said Britain is seeing a second wave of the coronavirus after the same was experienced in France and Spain. Now, Italians are voting in a constitutional referendum over a proposal to cut the number of lawmakers and 7 regional elections. Authorities say masks and hand sanitizers are mandatory to cast the ballot in the first public vote since the deadly COVID-19 outbreak in the country. The referendum proposes to reduce the number of lawmakers to 400 from 630 in the lower house and from 315 to 200 in the upper house. The co-ruling Five Star Movement has long called for the amendments, which is expected to pass despite indifferent backing from several other parties. The Five Star says the move will save money and streamline parliamentary processes, while the opponents say it will disrupt committee work with minimal savings. If the referendum goes through, the electoral system will need to be overhauled. The regional votes are being held in Tuscany, Puglia, Liguria, Marche, Veneto, Campania and Valle d'Aosta. Meanwhile, nearly 9,000 asylum seekers have moved into a new temporary facility on the Greek island of Lesbos. The new settlement has been established after a fire destroyed the Moria camp. Greek authorities say the new camp has been set up at the Karatepe near the mouth port of Mytilene. They said those entering the camp are being tested for the coronavirus. The authorities say they have so far placed 214 of the migrants in quarantine after testing positive. Displacing 12,000 people, the Moria fire left refugees without shelter, sanitation and access to food. Authorities believe the fire was started by the migrants after a dispute over quarantine measures at the facility. Meanwhile, in Greece, a medical center and main roads have collapsed in the Karditsa region after storm Lanos caused a river to overflow its banks. Cyclone Lanos uprooted trees and caused power cuts on the Ionian Islands and the western Peloponnese. It swept through central Greece, hitting areas in and around the cities of Karditsa and Farsala. Authorities say 2 people have died, while a search is underway for 2 others who have been reported missing. They say the electricity grid is struggling to cope and efforts are being made to restore the power. The Coast Guard says 5 vessels sank off the Zakynthos and Lefkada. Now, a Brazilian wheelchair-bound man has efficiently proven to be differently able. Julian D'Aurelio is a local celebrity in downtown Sao Paulo, famous for beating the odds and coming out stronger than ever. More about this delivery man in this report.
Aurelio zips around Sao Paulo, bringing meals to hungry customers. But unlike other food delivery men, he does not ride a bike to weave his way through the hectic streets of Brazil's megacity. 5 years ago, an accident dramatically changed Aurelio's life. Since he finally embraced his wheelchair as a source of strength rather than a sign of his disability, he hasn't looked back.
I tried to commit suicide 3 times and it didn't happen. Thank God. I don't regret it because life goes on, and today I am very happy. My wife is by my side, helping me out, making me stronger, always providing me with moral support. When my life changed, after accepting that I would live in a wheelchair, I remember I looked at the wheelchair and spoke to it. If I'm going to live with you, then I'm going to live. I want to see if you can handle me because I'm going to handle you. I want to see if you can take me.
Aurelio says he raised about $2,200 to adapt his motorbike to fit his wheelchair and in preparation for his job as a delivery man. He has been delivering food for some 6 months now, just about when the pandemic brought much of Brazil to a halt. But he is thankful for the daily grind of his job for getting him through tough times economically and emotionally.
The job of a delivery man is not made for us wheelchair users. I am in this situation today working as a delivery man, overcoming obstacles, overcoming challenges. Because us wheelchair users are not useless. We are not disabled, we are able to do things, we are capable of everything. We just have to run after it.
The delivery man says he has never been discriminated against and nobody has ever treated him disrespectfully. He is not getting too rich, but his life has been on the up.
Now, landmarks in Germany's capital Berlin have been lit up during the annual Festival of Lights. This year, the theme of Together We Shine pays tribute to the city and the solidarity of its residents during the coronavirus pandemic. Every year in fall, Berlin becomes a city of light art. Light productions on the world-famous landmarks of the German capital make the event one of the most popular light art festivals in the world. Together with national and international artists, the organizers transform Berlin into one big shining stage. Many local and international artists use this unique opportunity to project their temporary works of art onto some of the most recognizable buildings in the world. Illuminating different neighborhoods, this year's festival hopes to bring some joy during the coronavirus pandemic. It also endeavors to spread the concept of gratitude and solidarity in these difficult times and to bring people together outside in an open and safe environment. The festival takes place between 11th and 20th of September with over 100 light installations in more than 86 locations throughout Berlin. Now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.